The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Swalwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent that the statements in opposition to TSA's announced change to the prohibited items list that the committee received from the Transport Workers Union and Delta Airlines be inserted into the record, along with public statements opposing the changes by the Coalition of Airline Pilots Association, the Association of Flight Attendants, the American Federation of Government Employees, and the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association.
No objection.
Good afternoon, Administrator Pistole. After September 11th, 0 planes have been taken down by sharp objects, where sharp objects would have been used.
Correct.
To my understanding, there have been 0 attempts as well.
There was one attempted hijacking internationally. If you talk about domestically, there have been 0 attempts. Internationally, there was one attempt in 2009. It was a hijacking attempt with a plastic knife, unsuccessful, obviously.
And also 0 major stabbing issues with sharp objects.
0 that I'm aware of.
And for me, then, that begs the question that when we look at the number of attempts or successes that have taken place involving sharp objects post-September 11th, the answer is there have been 0. And that begs the question, can that number get better? And the answer is no. But it also begs the question, can that get worse? And to me, the answer is yes, it can get much worse. And so I ask, how does allowing sharp objects on board now accomplish the goal of maintaining 0 planes being taken over or having 0 incidents involving sharp objects? And I also understand, Administrator Pistole, that the shift towards risk-based threat assessment, and I appreciate the shift toward focusing on IEDs.
Thank you.
But just because this is a new threat does not mean that old threats still exist. And I would imagine that if we were to ask how many incidents occurred before September 11th involving sharp objects, we would also have found that the answer was 0. Yet the threat was still real, and tragically, we paid the price on September 11th. On this board, 3 knives. 2 are allowed under TSA's new rules and 1 banned, reflected by the checks and the X. I think most people out there would have a hard time telling the difference between what is allowed and what is banned. And I'm wondering, do you think that any one of these knives would be more or less dangerous than the other? And do you think one of these knives would be more or less successful in taking over an airplane and causing another terrorist attack?
Thank you, Congressman. You raised a number of good points, and our working group and experts considered those issues in quite some detail. In terms of some context, you know, the international, again, air community has allowed these anything 6 centimeters or shorter since August 2010. Again, no attempts. Here in the U.S., obviously, you see these items. Terrorists don't need to use those. They don't need to use these. They have things on board already, whether it's in first class, a metal knife or fork, whether it's a wine glass or wine bottle that they break and use. There's any number of things that could be used as a deadly instrument. The whole purpose of risk-based security is to take information that we have, both about terrorist intent and tactics, to make sure that we are preventing prior attack attempts, and the hijackings, obviously, at 9/11, which multiple layers of security that I'm sure you're familiar with, not just physical security. On the classified side, the intelligence about who's traveling, where they're traveling, all those things. So it really gets, again, to what is the intent of the person on board as opposed to the object. So if we simply focus on objects, then we're always behind the 8 ball. The whole purpose is to focus on the intent of the person. And so it really comes down to the mission of TSA. Is it to prevent disturbances by inebriated passengers on board? I don't think so.
And Administrator, but wouldn't you agree that if we look at the checked knives that would still be allowed, these green checked knives, which appear to be just slightly smaller in size than what would not be allowed, that in an orchestrated attack, they could do great damage to our flight attendants and great damage to our passengers, and perhaps, and hopefully not, but great damage to people on the ground when a plane could be used as a missile?
Well, so if you're asking whether I think individuals with those small pocket knives could take over an aircraft, take control of it, I don't think so, because of all the other layers of security we have in place, including the thousands of federal flight deck officers who are armed in the cockpit, the hardened cockpit doors, the response of the valiant crew and passengers who would not allow that to happen. If we had a group of terrorists, if you will, get on a plane here in the U.S., Without anybody else in the U.S. intelligence, law enforcement community knowing about those, they haven't come up on anybody's radar, then we've had a failure of the U.S. national security program rather than just at a checkpoint.
And I would just conclude, Mr. Chair, by saying, you know, for 11 years we have not had an incident since September 11th, and I think largely because of a lot of the good work TSA has done, and so that's why I'm asking why now, and why do we want to go back? So thank you, Administrator.
Thank you, Congressman. Yep.
Thank the gentleman. The chair now